Here's a pitch on the way. He swings and fouls it off, and the man from Walla Walla will take that one home. Swing, there's a drive to left. That one is long gone.
Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine, and it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all.
What's going on, Tigers fans and Detroit Sports Nation? AJ Riley here with the newest episode of The Corner, recapping what happened this weekend, which was an utter failure, as we said last week it would be if they did not win this series, and then previewing this Independence Day doubleheader 4-game series with the Cleveland Guardians. We got a leadoff. And we also have a peanut gallery at the end where we will discuss everything going on with our owner, our GM, the Detroit Tigers, and just what a complete waste of a season this has been. But before we get to the leadoff, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe at YouTube. Hit that bell. You can also follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner for Tigers news, MLB news. Everything that you might want to get from your baseball content, you can find there at Twitter. So let's go ahead and let's jump into the leadoff. And it is July 4th, so let me start by saying Happy Independence Day. Today is a day for America, right? Barbecues, baseball, whatever you may want to indulge in, boats, anything that could be fun for this remembrance of the day where America declared its independence. We celebrate that today, but there's also something else that we celebrate, well, or remember, I guess is the better way to say that. And that was 83 years ago when Lou Gehrig gave his famous speech saying goodbye to baseball after being diagnosed with ALS. If you have been around baseball at all, you know the name Lou Gehrig. He's a 2-time MVP, 7-time All-Star, 6-time World Champion. He was a 113 WAR player in his career with a .340 career batting average, 493 home runs, and 1,995 RBIs over his career, which was shortened by ALS, which now is called the Lou Gehrig's disease. And 83 years ago, on July 4th, he stood in front of a crowd at Yankee Stadium, and he said goodbye to baseball. And it's one of those speeches that has resonated throughout the corridor of time, where we continue to hear him say, "Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." And he goes through a whole speech, and he labels why he was a lucky man, being, given a gift from the New York Giants, who he says anybody would give their right arm to beat. And he also talks about how his mother-in-law and father-in-law would side with him in arguments for his wife, and how could you not be lucky about that? But one of the things that he said at the end of his speech, when he was recounting why he was the luckiest man on the face of the earth, he ended his speech by saying, and I think it's something that we could all take to heart and use pretty often when things just aren't going well for us. Remember, this is a guy at the top of his profession, one of the greatest players of all time, that caught a bad break. And he said, "I may have caught a tough break, but I have an awful lot to live for." And I read those words and I think about that consistently when I think about Lou Gehrig, is just the perspective that he went into that speech with, saying, "I might have caught a tough break, but I have an awful lot to live for." And we know ultimately ALS ended his life, but it was 83 years ago today, on Independence Day, that he gave that luckiest man speech in front of a packed house at Yankee Stadium. And we said goodbye to one of the greatest players that has ever played the game. And, there's a connection to Detroit here too, actually, because if it were not for Lou Gehrig, Hank Greenberg would not have been a Tiger. Hank Greenberg was actually recruited and scouted by the Yankees, but he went to a Yankees game when he was about 18 years old and saw Lou Gehrig in the on-deck circle. And he said, there's no way I would ever play over that man. So he signed with the Detroit Tigers, which is an interesting connection. But today is the day that we do remember Lou Gehrig. And there was no other way to lead off the show than to talk about one of the greatest players that's ever played, the Iron Horse, who played so many consecutive games, replaced Wally Pipp and never looked back. And then 2 weeks before he gave this speech, he actually ended his consecutive game streak right in Detroit. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of the career of Lou Gehrig. Then he gives this speech and says that fantastic final line. I'll say it one more time. I may have caught a tough break, he said, but I have an awful lot to live for. And we think about that today on Independence Day. We're going through it as Tigers fans. It has not been an easy season, and it was, a bow tied on it this weekend with the Royals in town. It was just a brutal, brutal series. Tigers ended up losing 2 of 3. They lost game 1, 3-1, after they left 10 men on base and went 0 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Brad Keller dominated. I mean, he went 7 innings, had his entire mix of pitches. I mean, when he was behind, he could drop a slider or a curveball in there, and the Tigers just could not push runs across the plate. They couldn't even really get hits to begin with. They had plenty of opportunities. Obviously, they had 12 opportunities with guys in scoring position and could not push any runs across. And it just set the tone for how brutal this weekend was going to be. And ultimately, they should have ultimately been swept had it not been for Riley Greene in Game 2, where him and Victor Reyes go back-to-back in the bottom of the ninth, down 3-2. They end up winning the game 4-3, but when you think about that game and the just fantastic ending to it, I mean, I don't want to take away from Riley Greene and what he did. It was, I mean, that he scored 3 of our 4 runs that day. He was and has been this breath of fresh air for an offense that is just historically bad. But yet we get to watch Riley Greene. So I want to kind of remind us of the fact that we're getting to see one of the best players, young players, coming up. He's a number 2 overall prospect in baseball, and he's playing like the number 2 overall prospect in baseball. The problem is he's surrounded by a bunch of guys that had just struggled. So had it not been for Riley Greene and his heroics, the Tigers should have been swept this weekend. The offense did enough on Saturday to stay in the game. Thankfully, the bullpen kept them in the game. Bo Brisky, he did compete and go a little bit deeper, but struggled. I mean, it wasn't easy. But the Tigers did win, got their 30th win on the season, won 4-3 on a mammoth walk-off shot. I mean, 430 to dead center. For Riley Greene, and you're kind of starting to see that pop jump into his bat a little bit, getting more comfortable in that leadoff position, really. I mean, there's no reason he should not be hitting leadoff for the rest of the season. Well, then that moved us into Sunday, where Brady Singer was dealing. He only went 4 2/3, which is insane for how good he looked. But the Tigers did get to him a little bit in the 5th inning. He only went 4 2/3, but had 9 strikeouts in those 4 2/3, and it's just insane. Tarek Skubal did not match the quality that Brady Singer was dealing on Sunday. He again only went 4 2/3 innings and walked 3 batters, gave up 5 total runs because Willie Peralta came in and walked a guy with the bases loaded. The Tigers twice walked guys with bases loaded and ended up losing by 3 runs, which is just unacceptable. Entirely unacceptable. And we've talked about this a lot. Like the walks that the the pitching staff has been giving up over the last, few series going back to Arizona has just been insane. On Sunday, they walked 8 batters again. Only had 4 total strikeouts. 8 batters. But again, the offense struggled. 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position. Torkelson, yes, he did hit a 2-run home run, and it is good that he got off that schneid a little bit. He is hitting the ball a lot harder, but he did ground into 2 double plays. One of them on a first pitch, second one on the second pitch of the at-bat. Just crazy the opportunities that the Tigers are wasting. So ultimately, the Tigers are 30-47 on the season going into their next series. They are only 1 game better than the Kansas City Royals, who have the worst record in at least the AL. So the Tigers are really vying for that infamous title. They could not hit a very susceptible pitching staff. They could not get to a very susceptible bullpen, and they just looked lost. I mean, look, I don't want to take away from what Brady Singer did in those 4 2/3 innings. He had those guys off balance. He had them guessing. I mean, when guys are seeing that 2-seam fastball on the inside corner and diving out of the way, and it comes back over the corner of the plate, and they're just walking back to the dugout because they know they got fooled, he is having a good day. So I don't want to take away from him, but the Tigers just could not hit the ball. And this is after coming out of San Francisco, where they had a really good offensive series. Same thing in Arizona. They really were putting together good at-bats and pushing a lot of runs across the plate. And here they push 8 across in 3 games. Just brutal offensive series. And I said at the beginning with the recap, with the preview of this series, the last show, I said if they do not win this series, it's an utter failure. And this is an utter failure, and it's precipitated by comments that we're going to talk about later in this show that are just completely and utterly tone deaf. But you know what you got to do when you come out of a bad series? You got to turn the page. You got to turn the page, and that's where we're going to turn the page to the Guardians, who are in town Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. 3 games, 4 games in 3 days. I'm sorry about that. With a split doubleheader on Monday night, where we will see the debut of Garrett Hill, who was drafted in the 26th round by the Tigers in 2018. Throws a low 90s fastball with a mix of off-speed and breaking stuff. Had a really high strikeout rate, about 10 or 11 per 9 in AAA in the 8 starts that he made, but he did also walk 4 batters per 9. He had a 4.06 ERA in AAA in 8 starts with a 3.87 FIP. He will be facing off against Zach Plesac, who's 2-5. He gets about 6.5 strikeouts per 9. Walks about 2 batters per 9, has a 273 batting average on balls in play, so definitely need to put the ball in play against him, with a 3.86 ERA, which shows that he's been getting a little bit lucky with balls being turned into outs, because his actual fielding independent pitching is 4.43. His FIP is 4.43. The game 2 of the doubleheader, Monday night at 6:40. The Guardians are probably going to be pitching, either going with a bullpen day, or they're going to be calling up somebody for a spot start. It was to be determined on any site that I looked at, and they'll be facing off against the Tigers' 27th man, recently optioned Alex Faedo, who is 1-4. He has been striking out about 7 batters per 9 innings, but walking about 3 batters per 9 innings. And his FIP and ERA are relatively close, an ERA of 4.84 and a FIP of 4.50. And listen, the news of optioning Alex Faedo might have seemed strange, given you want to give the young arms some run at the major league level. But Faedo is coming off Tommy John surgery and does need to be put on an innings limit. So they're going to tap the brakes. They're going to slow down the pace on which they've been working him. I wouldn't be surprised if they ask him to only give them 4 innings in Game 2. So hopefully Garrett Hill in Game 1 doesn't tax the bullpen too much. But I will not be surprised if we only get about 5 innings from both starters in the doubleheader against the Guardians on Monday. Game 3 on Tuesday is gonna face Cal Quintrell Quantrill, against to be determined for the Tigers. It's not going to be Brisky because he won't be on 5 days rest. This would be the spot for Ronnie Garcia, but Ronnie Garcia was recently placed on the 15-day disabled list. So the Tigers pitching on Tuesday is going to be determined. Now, what you're most likely looking at is Garrett Hill coming up, making his debut on Monday. Then he will be optioned back to the minor leagues, and they will probably call somebody up to make that start on Tuesday. Quantrill is 4-4 this year, striking out about 5 batters per 9 innings, walking almost 3 batters per 9 innings. He has a .269 batting average on balls in play, a .372 ERA, which again shows that he's been a little bit lucky because his FIP is about 4.47. So there's definitely opportunity here in these first, 2 out of the first 3 games, because we don't know who's pitching for the Guardians in the nightcap of the doubleheader. There's an opportunity to get to these guys, but there was also an opportunity to get to the Royals, and they just didn't do that. So I don't even know how to analyze. All I can give you is the numbers and say this is what could happen, but don't be surprised if it doesn't, because that's just who the Tigers are. Game 4, the wrap-up game Wednesday afternoon, is going to face Shane Bieber going against Michael Pineda. Bieber on the season is 3-4 with about 9 strikeouts per 9 innings and walks about 2 batters per 9 innings. He does have a very elevated batting average on balls in play at .315, but he's got a great ERA at .316, and his FIP is even better at .283. Who's going to be facing Michael Pineda, who's 1-3 on the season, is only striking out about 9 batters, or 5 batters per 9 innings. Sorry, the numbers get jumbled. Michael Pineda is striking out 5 batters per 9 innings. He's only walking about 1 batter per 9 innings. Has a batting average of .250 on balls in play. His ERA is .362, but he has been getting luckier than lucky with his FIP being over 5.31. So a split is what you're looking for here out of the Tigers. You can't expect them to win, especially with the way they played this weekend. Cannot expect them to win 3 out of these 4 games, or let alone sweep them. So a split we should be celebrating at this point, because you just don't know what you're going to get. Now, what we normally do with these previews is I give you what they do well and what they don't do so well, the Guardians, the opposing team. So here's what they're in the top half of baseball in walks per 9 innings. So they only walk about 3 batters in their pitching per 9 innings. So definitely got to put the ball in play. Definitely got to attack those first best pitches that you see, because the batting average on ball in play is a little bit elevated for their pitching staff. So we want to make sure that we put those balls in play. But they're a middle-of-the-road team statistically. They are second in the AL Central as far as games, but I think they're only 2 games behind the Minnesota Twins, a few games ahead of the Chicago White Sox. But they've really been standing on their head and are a very surprising team this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out down the stretch for them. They have some good players. Jose Ramirez specifically, who is just the ultimate. He's taken the mantle from Nelson Cruz of the ultimate Tiger killer at this point, because he just hits like crazy. But another thing that they do well is that they create runs on the base paths. They're only about 3% below MLB average with a 97 weighted runs created plus. Below MLB average, about 3% in their ability to create runs. So when they get on the bases, you got to find a way to stop them from scoring, and they've done a pretty good job as a team doing that. The other thing that they have is they have Emmanuel Clase, who's their closer, has a 28% strike rate, walks about 4.5 per 9 innings, but he's got a 1.31 ERA and a 1.86 FIP. So do not be behind when you're facing Clase, because that guy, he can spin it for sure. One of the things they don't do so well, though, they are the worst in the league at hard hit rate, and they are 23rd in the league at weighted on base average, which accounts for offensive events and their ability to produce runs. Their 302 weighted on base average is considered poor. according to Fangraphs. However, they are better in that weighted on base average than the Tigers because the Tigers are actually considered awful. So take that for what you will. I've already said, listen, you should celebrate a split at this point, especially coming off the way that they played. This team is just a complete roller coaster with the way that they play baseball right now. So a split would be a win in a lot of ways. So let's look forward to those games. 4 games in 3 days with the Guardians in, and an opportunity to win, hopefully, a few games. Now listen, the Tigers are playing a lot of games leading up to the All-Star break. They have, I think, 3 doubleheaders in the next 3 weeks. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of different lineups with a lot of different guys getting some time off. Now, time for the peanut gallery, and let's talk about progress, because that seems to be the buzzword coming out of the Detroit Tigers front office Friday. Friday, the Detroit Red Wings introduced their new coach, and at the press conference, the owner of the Detroit Tigers was asked about how he felt about the progress of the Tigers. Now listen, let's be very clear up front that Chris Ilitch is not directly to blame for this team yet. He's not directly to blame for this team. But the comments that he made at that press conference show his inability to realize what reality is. Let me read you his comments. He was asked about the progress. He said, "I'm very pleased with the progress of the Detroit Tigers." Notice that. Not pleased, not okay with, very pleased. Despite a slow start to the season, we're almost halfway through the season, but despite a slow start to the season with our team, there's actually some good progress happening with some of the young guys that have come up and developed and so on and so forth. Chris, tell me you don't know what's going on in this team without telling me you don't know what's going on in this team. So on and so forth. The development of young players. What growth and development have we seen from young players? This team is 17 games below 500. 538 projects them as a 66-96 baseball team. 11 games below the mark that they won last year. That's progress? I want to talk about young guys. Greene's been phenomenal. Mize is out with Tommy John surgery. Turnbull's out with Tommy John surgery. Jake Rogers is out with Tommy John surgery. Torkelson's having trouble adjusting. Okay, now I don't want to give up on Torkelson, but he is statistically the worst rookie in baseball right now. Mistake pitches over the middle and he fouls them off or grounds them. He's not making pitchers pay. But I don't want to give up on him. I don't think that him being in AAA is going to do anything other than allow him to see the bat hit the ball, which could be good. There's value in that. But it might be better for him to learn and struggle and learn through the struggles up here. But the minors are now filled, like our farm system, which was touted as one of the best in baseball, really propped up on just a few, Mize, Greene, and Torkelson type guys. Skubal you could throw in there, though he came on and kind of came out of nowhere. But it's filled with a bunch of guys that are average or below average MLB players. It's not like there's some savior that we can look at coming for fans to kind of rest on. That was Greene. He's come up. He's been great. But there's really nobody else on the farm. And this lays squarely on the shoulders of Al Avila. And we've laid out all the horrendous deals that have led to this point. And, now everybody wants to point to the deal that was made for Isaac Paredes and Austin Meadows at the beginning of the season as like the next failed deal, which on the surface level it is. Listen, Paredes has hit the ball very hard, 13 home runs, driving in. There was even an article on DSN of how he came back from the dugout after a home run and, one of the players said that, the Tigers are effing idiots. So now the Tigers are the joke of other teams as well. And the reality is they probably gave up on Paredes too quickly. But at the time of the deal, it really wasn't a bad deal. The issue with the deal is what you're starting to see right now, is that you're looking at potentially not having a third baseman next season because there's a potential that Jeimer Candelario could go the way of Matthew Boyd and could go the way of James McCann being non-tendered. And the other part that makes the deal look worse is the fact that Jonathan Scope has just been completely struggling this year. It would be great to still have Isaac Paredes in the minor leagues and be able to let go of one of those two guys and let him get some run. He never got a consistent run with the Tigers, so we didn't really truly know what we had. But that speaks to the problem of what we're saying with Al Avila. There's no depth on this team. There's really no hope beyond what we see on the Major League club right now because of the way the roster's been structured. The only thing that you can hope to do is to deal some of the prized assets to actually build a team, which they've not done. They built a great pitching staff, but not a great team. But when you look at who's making those deals, you have to wonder, can Al really do it? He traded J.D. Martinez, and not a single one of those assets returned contributed to the Tigers in any way. He traded JV, and the verdict's most likely going to be the same. Compare that to somebody like a Rick Hahn with the White Sox, who wheeled and dealed, got massive returns for lesser products. Got a great return for Jose Quintana, which is not the same quality of pitcher dealt like a Justin Verlander. But yet he made a great deal. And he's created a good team that's just had some really bad injury luck this season. But the bottom line is this. If Al Avila is the GM of the Detroit Tigers beyond this season, and I'm telling you, I would have handed him his walking papers after the game yesterday on Sunday. Then if he's still the GM after this season, it's pure negligence on Chris Ilitch's part. And he can save us the process talk and the rebuild is over talk and the attitude that we just have to trust the process and be patient. But we've been patient. It's been 8 years since the Tigers were in the playoffs. And for the last 6, they've been out of contention by the All-Star break. We've been patient. We don't need to be patient any longer. What we need you to do is put a good product on the field. Is build a contender. We're not asking you to take shortcuts. We're not asking you to buy your way out of it necessarily, but get somebody at the helm that can actually build a baseball team. That's the problem. So, Chris, when you talk about progress, I don't know what you're talking about. There has not been progress. In fact, you could almost argue that there has been regression. From 77 wins down to a projected 66. And it may take a miracle for them to get another 36 wins this season. That's not progress. Riley Greene's been great. Spencer Torkelson has struggled. Do I think Spencer Torkelson's going to continue to struggle? Not for the rest of his career. But it's going to be a rough season. What developments have led you to believe that this is progress? This is not progress. And if your trust is in Al Avila, it's misplaced. We've been patient. The time for waiting is over. So save us the talk about process. Save us the talk about progress. Because we are not idiots. We are not dumb baseball fans. We know the game. We can see the numbers. We can understand the fact that we are the worst offensive team in Major League Baseball. That's not progress. Not anywhere close to progress. Give us what we deserve. That's going to do it for us on the corner. Hopefully we can see some good baseball over the next 3 days, 4 games, against the Cleveland Guardians. I'm AJ Riley. Don't forget to like and subscribe at YouTube. And you can follow me at DSN at the corner on Twitter for all Major League Baseball and Detroit Tigers news. We will see you next week. And always, regardless of how they're playing, go Tigers.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what? Yeah.